Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm pleased to tell you that in spite of the fact that the Packers beat the Bears and the Steelers beat the Jets, the stock market is still up today. The world didn't come to an end, globally at least. I'm sure some hearts were broken though. And quite frankly, I did that's about as close as I'm going to get to a CFO presentation today. I'm proud to be the Chief Financial Officer for the Boy Scouts of America, but I'm not a real finance guy. I know how to raise money, and I know how to read finance sheets, but I'm not the specialist. We have folks that do that for us, and they do a very good job with it. I'm here to talk to you about programming, because everything I am today started in West Virginia when I joined a Cub Scout pack and later a Boy Scout troop. And the first first troop meeting I went to in the Boy Scout troop, which met in the basement of a grocery store, I was given a Army shelter hat left over from the Korean War. And every boy was given a shelter hat. And that was our campus, that was our tentage. And we'd get to the campsite, we'd do our best to button those two shelter hats together. How many of you been under a shelter hat? Not that tall off the ground, is it not? They're a lot smaller to me today than they were when I was in Boy Scout. And that was my introduction into the great outdoors. I mean, I always played outdoors, but I really came to appreciate it in a different way through my Scoutmaster, and I owe him a great deal. He's still living, and I visit him every time I go back home to West Virginia to see my mom. I've been privileged throughout my 41-year career with the Boy Scouts of America to work in 6 different Boy Scout councils, 5 of them as the CEO or the council scout executive. And I've had a wide variety of camping properties that we have used for camping. The first one I was responsible for was 100 acres, almost a postage stamp, which now is a housing development. The last one, the last council I served in was Kansas City, Missouri. Only had 2 camps, huge scouting population, and one of those camps was 1,000 acres, has now grown to 1,200 acres, and the other camp was 3,300 acres. For 4 years, I was scout executive in Jacksonville, Florida, and that's probably the most extreme camp I've ever been associated with. We had 2 camps actually. One was on a lake called Doctors Lake in Orange Park, Florida, in the middle of a metropolitan area that focused on waterfront activities. And we had a day camp every summer that ran for 8 or 9 weeks that focused on nothing but water activities. And then the Boy Scout camp was about 80 miles south at Camp Shantz, just north of Micanopy, Florida, where the movie Doc Hollywood. In fact, if you remember the movie Doc Hollywood, the cabin that Doc Hollywood, Michael J. Fox, lived in theory, was on the scout camp. And the lake they took a rowboat out on was our camp. That was an extreme because that camp had so much deep sand all over the facility. It was tougher to walk in some areas of that scout camp than it was to walk on the sand on the beach the further away you get from the surf. You know, just out, your foot sinks and you can't get any traction. Plus the lake was a relatively small lake, and every summer about March we would start taking alligators out of the lake so that we could swim in it during the summer. And we'd leave anything in less than 3 feet long. And you know, we had some guys, some scouts claim that they got nibbled on a little bit. And we told them they were a little crappy that were there, that we would never recognize that it might be one of the little alligators. And then I go to one of the finest facilities I've ever been responsible for, and that's a camp outside Kansas City, about 100 miles outside Kansas City, called the Bartle Scout Reservation. And the extreme of the sand in Jacksonville was that every place you took a step at the Bartle Scout Reservation, you stepped on a rock. It was the rockiest camp I have ever been in. my entire scouting career. So I've had a lot of extremes, and I wouldn't trade any one of those experiences at all. This past year, 2010, was the 100th anniversary of the Boy Scouts of America. And you have in front of you a little souvenir that I'd like to share with you. This is actually a little condensed history book that we made available at a traveling roadshow we had this summer. Actually, this past 12 months. It lasted, kicked off January the 1st at the Tournament of Roses Parade and ended Thanksgiving weekend on the Intrepid in New York City. And you'll get a flavor of scouting. There's a great DVD that we showed at the Adventure Base 100, something I'd like for you to take. I would also like to recognize the two corporate sponsors that helped us put on this program and create this book, and that's AT&T and ExxonMobil. You may be aware that both of those corporate giants are headquartered here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and the heads of both of those organizations are on our board. Rex Tillerson of Exxon is currently serving, he's an Eagle Scout, is currently serving as our national president. And Randall Stevenson, the head of AT&T, whose offices are in downtown Dallas. Randall is the vice president of the National Council of Boy Scouts and will be serving as the chairman of our National Scout Jamboree in 2013. That will be held at our new jamborees, the home of our new jamboree in West Virginia. We did start the celebration at the Tournament of Roses Parade. Got a lot of exposure and positive publicity. And at the tail end of the parade, where they park all of the floats after the parade has ended, we set up, for the first time, Adventure Base 100, which is a 10,000 square foot camping area that had a ropes course, had hands-on experience, had a multi-sensory IMAX type presentation under a geodesic dome that had surround sound that just drew raves from everybody who participated in it. And we did 42 different stops all around the United States. And the best count we have is that we exposed scouting to well over 250,000 people in these experiences. People who actually came to the AV 100 and saw what was going on, put their hands on something, went through the museum, did the ropes course, saw the movie in the dome. And we think it was a home run. We had an 18-wheeler rolling all across the United States in between these stops, widely decorated with telling the scouting story. So we were exposed a great deal during 2010, our 100th anniversary. We launched an IndyCar to further enhance our public perception. We launched an IndyCar, and it turned out to be the one driven by the Rookie Driver of the Year in the IRL circuit. We were very pleased with that. We also launched a Centennial stamp as well as a Centennial coin. In fact, with the U.S. Mint, the Centennial coin was the quickest selling coin in its history in the commemorative program, and we sold 350,000 of those coins. We had a huge march in downtown Washington before the Scout Jamboree this summer that drew thousands and thousands of people would stand by and watch thousands of scouts walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. We televised our National Scout Jamboree from Fort A.P. Hill around the world. And we also announced the plans to build a permanent Jamboree site in West Virginia. And also our intention is to host a World Scout Jamboree at that same site, and also create a high adventure base on these same 11,000 acres. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that just a little bit later. And one thing that is yet to happen, this coming summer, we will plant 100,000 trees in what we will call the Centennial Forest. It's going to be held in the Flatheads National Forest in Wyoming to replace a section of this national forest that burned and was totally destroyed by fire. And we look forward to that, and we feel our major partners in this are, of course, the National Park Service, local Boy Scout councils, and the Arbor Day Foundation. And the Arbor Day Foundation is so convinced that this is going to be such a widely successful event that they're already planning and looking for a site on the East Coast so that we can build a second centennial forest with 100,000 trees in it. So we're excited about that. Well, no matter how much we try to convince you, how much we do to educate kids about the out of doors and getting them in the out of doors, I'd like to share with you some proof of that pudding. We had over 270,000 young kids, ages 7 through 10, participate in day camps across America just this past summer. We had 200,000 families and their children participate in family camping events held by 296 different local Boy Scout councils across the United States. We had almost 400,000 Boy Scouts participate in a 7-day, 6-night camping experience, which we call a long-term camping experience, in a council camp. And then on top of that, we have our 3 high adventure bases. One in Minnesota, one in the Florida Keys, and one in New Mexico. The one in Minnesota focuses on canoeing and carrying your canoe. And we're very pleased to tell you that we had over 4,400 participants in that summertime program. We also run a wintertime program that's I guess just concluded, Frank. Is that
still going up?
Okay. March. Doesn't attract a lot of people, but it's done in the dead of winter in Ely, Minnesota, which is not southern Minnesota, it's northern Minnesota. And everybody who goes, they become a hero in their own eyes and in the eyes of anybody who's originally thought they were crazy to go there anyway. But the United States Forest Service tells us that because of what we do and have done at the Northern Tier Canoe Base, we do about 80% of all portage trail restoration in the boundary waters, and we're proud of that. In fact, we also have contributed over 4,800 hours just this past year in doing portage trail restoration in Canada, because we need to be good neighbors, because we use their property. In Florida, in the Florida Keys, about halfway down, Isla Morada, we have the Florida Sea Base, the youngest of our National High Adventure bases, that attracted 9,000 people this past year. It's a full 12-month program, not just the summertime. And at Philmont, the granddaddy of all, Philmont Scout Ranch in Cimarron, New Mexico, we had over 21,000 young people and leaders participate in the programs there, the trail programs at Philmont. Philmont's 138,000 acres, and I'm not going to assume all of you know Frank Riggleman. Do you know Frank? Frank, would you stand up? Frank is the director of all of our camping programs at the National Office of the Boy Scouts of America, and he's also walked on all the rocks in Kansas City. He served as a scout executive in New Mexico and worked at Philmont Scout Ranch for a long time. He's our outdoor expert, absolutely our outdoor expert. And he knows a lot of details that I don't know, so if you ask me any tough questions, I'm going to ask Frank to help with the answer. But the interesting thing about Philmont is that with having 21,000 people there, a slight drop from last year because we had the National Scout Jamboree going on in the summer, which attracted over 30,000 young people. So there was a lot of competition. But for next summer, we already have paid reservations for almost 22,000. And in fact, we already have a waiting list for 2012. And it's numbers like that and the success rate that we have had at this ranch in New Mexico, northern New Mexico, that led us on the search for a new high adventure base.